The old clock in the orphanage hall always seemed to tick a little louder when trouble was near. Today, it hammered like a drum. Mr. Black, a man whose name fit his mood, stepped into the dusty entrance. He was rich, everyone knew that. His clothes were crisp, his shoes shined, and his face was set like stone. He didn't smile, he didn't nod, he just looked around with eyes that saw only numbers, not children. The orphanage, named Hope's Haven, was anything but a haven that morning. It was cold, the paint was peeling, and the smell of old wood and worn dreams hung heavy in the air. Children, usually full of shouts and laughter, now whispered and huddled together, peeking from doorways. They knew why he was here. Everyone did. Mr. Black wasn't here to bring toys or tell stories. He was here for money. A lot of money. Hope's Haven had borrowed from him a long time ago, a big loan to fix a leaky roof and buy new beds. But times had been hard. Donations had dried up, and illnesses had swept through the town, making everything worse. The money was due, and Mr. Black was not a man who forgot debts. He walked past the threadbare rug in the main hall, his footsteps echoing too loudly. Mrs. Gable, the kind woman who ran Hope's Haven, wrung her hands. Her face was pale, her usual bright smile gone. She met Mr. Black in the small office, its window looking out onto a patchy lawn. "Mr. Black," she started, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming." He didn't reply, just fixed her with a gaze that felt colder than winter ice. He pulled a thick folder from his expensive briefcase and laid it on the worn desk. The papers inside seemed to hum with unspoken threats. "Mrs. Gable." His voice was deep and flat, like stones rubbing together. "The payment is overdue. Significantly overdue." Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know, sir. We've been trying. The children. They need so much. The winter was harsh, and then the sickness." Mr. Black held up a hand, cutting her off. He wasn't interested in stories of hardship. He was interested in figures, in dates, in contracts. The agreement was clear. Funds were disbursed, and a repayment schedule was established. "You have failed to meet your obligations." He tapped a page in the folder. "The terms of default are also clear. As per the contract, I am entitled to reclaim the property." Mrs. Gable gasped a small choke sound. "Reclaim the property?" "Mr. Black, this is their home. These children have nowhere else to go." Her voice rose with panic. "Please, just a little more time. We're holding a fundraiser next month. We believe we can gather enough to at least make a partial payment." Mr. Black leaned back in his chair, a faint sigh escaping him. It wasn't a sigh of sympathy, but one of impatience. Fundraisers are unreliable. Promises are hollow. The contract is binding. He looked around the small, cramped office, his nose wrinkling slightly as if he smelled something unpleasant. "This establishment is a liability. It is inefficiently managed." His words were like daggers, piercing Mrs. Gable's already fragile hope. She felt tears prickling her eyes, but she fought them back. She had to be strong for the children. "Please, Mr. Black, think of the children. Where will they go? The city shelters are full. They'll be out on the streets." Mr. Black finally looked directly at her, his expression unchanging. "That is not my concern, Mrs. Gable. My concern is the recovery of my investment. Business is business." He started to close the folder, a final gesture that sealed their fate. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. Outside the office door, a few children had crept closer, their small faces peering around the frame, listening. They didn't understand all the words, but they understood the sad, desperate sound in Mrs. Gable's voice. They understood the coldness radiating from the man in the sharp suit. One of them, a girl named Lily, felt a knot of anger tighten in her stomach. She was 15, old enough to grasp the cruelty of the situation. She'd seen Mrs. Gable cry many times in secret, worrying about food, about bills, about keeping a roof over their heads. Lily remembered the day the new beds arrived, how happy everyone had been, and now this man wanted to take it all away. Mr. Black stood up, adjusting his tie. He was a tall man, and in the small office he seemed to fill all the space, leaving no room for hope. I will expect you to vacate the premises by the end of the week, he stated, his voice final. My legal team will be in touch with the details. He turned to leave, his polished shoes clicking on the wooden floor. Mrs. Gable stood frozen, tears now streaming freely down her face. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. The children watching gasped softly. As Mr. Black walked past the open office door, past the group of wide-eyed children, his gaze swept over them without really seeing them. They were just obstacles, statistics. He reached the main hall, heading towards the heavy front door, eager to put this unpleasant business behind him. Lily, however, had moved. A fire had ignited within her, burning away her fear. She stepped out from the shadows, her small frame surprisingly steady. Her eyes, usually soft and kind, were now blazing with a fierce defiance. She watched him, this cold, unfeeling man who cared nothing for the lives he was about to shatter. Her heart pounded a wild drum in her chest. He reached the door, his hand already on the cold metal knob. He was almost out, almost free of the lingering sadness of Hope's Haven. But then, Lily did something no one, least of all Mr. Black, expected. With a deep breath, she stepped forward just a few quick strides. She looked down at his perfectly shined, expensive leather shoe. And then, with all the anger and desperation she felt, she spat. A small, wet glob landed squarely on the toe of his right shoe, a dark, glistening stain on the pristine black leather. The sound was surprisingly loud in the hushed hall. A collective gasp went through the children. Mrs. Gable's sobs stopped abruptly, replaced by a terrified silence. No one moved, no one breathed. The air itself seemed to freeze. Mr. Black stopped. His hand dropped from the doorknob. He slowly, very slowly, lowered his gaze to his shoe. He saw the spittle, stark against the polished leather. Then his head rose. His eyes, usually so cold, now held something else, something unreadable. He looked at Lily, standing there, defiant, trembling slightly but refusing to back down. He just stared at her. His expression didn't change to anger or shock or even disgust. Instead, a tiny, almost invisible flicker crossed his face. Was it amusement? He said nothing, not a word. He simply stared at Lily for a long moment, then looked back at his shoe, then back at her. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, without a sound, he turned the doorknob, opened the door, and walked out into the pale morning light, leaving behind a stunned, silent orphanage. The heavy door clicked shut behind him, sealing in the silence, the fear, and the lingering, defiant stain on his shoe. The heavy oak door of Hope's Haven clicked shut, leaving behind an echoing silence. The smell of fear and stalewood filled the air. Everyone stood frozen, staring at the spot where Mr. Black had just been. Their eyes then slowly, cautiously, turned to Lily. Lily, 15 years old, felt her heart thump like a trapped bird against her ribs. Her face was flushed, but her chin was still held high. She had done it. She had spat on the shoe of the man who held their future in his cold, uncaring hands. A shiver ran down her spine, part fear, part a strange, hot triumph. Mrs. Gable, her face streaked with tears, was the first to move. She rushed to Lily, her hands shaking as she gripped the girl's shoulders. "Lily, what have you done? What have you done?" Her voice was a terrified whisper, laced with a fear that went deeper than just losing the orphanage. She feared for Lily, for what Mr. Black might do to her. The younger children, who had been hiding behind the worn furniture, slowly crept out. Their faces were a mix of awe and terror. They had never seen anyone stand up to an adult like that, let alone someone as powerful and scary as Mr. Black. They looked at Lily as if she were a hero, or perhaps a very foolish martyr. He was going to take everything, Mrs. Gable. Lily's voice, though still a little shaky, held a fierce conviction. He didn't care about us. He didn't care about you. He just wanted his money. He deserved it. Mrs. Gable pulled Lily into a tight hug, burying her face in the girl's hair. "Oh, Lily, my brave, foolish girl," she murmured, tears now flowing freely. He could do anything. He could make things so much worse for us all. The older children started to whisper among themselves. "Lily's so brave," one boy said, his eyes wide. Another added, "But what if he sends the police? Or worse?" The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud blotting out the already dim light of the orphanage. Lily pulled back from Mrs. Gable, her eyes scanning the faces of the younger children. Their fear was clear, but so was a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, her act had shown them that even against the biggest bully, you could fight back. "He just stared," Lily said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "He didn't say anything. He just left." She remembered the strange flicker in his eyes, that almost amused look. It was unsettling. It wasn't the angry outburst she had expected, nor the immediate punishment. It was something else entirely. Hours crawled by. Each tick of the old clock seemed to announce an impending doom. Mrs. Gable tried to keep things normal, but her hands still trembled as she served lunch. The children picked at their meager meals, their usual chatter replaced by anxious silence. Every distant car sound made them jump. Every shadow made them glance nervously at the front door. Lily sat by the window, staring out at the empty street. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. The splat, the shock, Mr. Black's unreadable stare. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had she doomed them all? A cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. The afternoon wore on. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The children were gathered in the main hall for story time, a usual comfort that felt forced today. Mrs. Gable read from a worn book, her voice a little too bright, a little too shaky. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. It grew louder, a deep rumble that vibrated through the old floorboards. All heads snapped up. The younger children whimpered, clutching at Mrs. Gable's skirt. Lily, still by the window, pressed her face against the cold glass. Her heart leaped in her throat. Dark shapes were appearing down the street. Not one car, but many. Big, black, shiny cars. They moved slowly, deliberately, turning onto the narrow lane leading to Hope's Haven. They were here. Mr. Black had returned. Panic flared through the orphanage. Mrs. Gable dropped the storybook, her face turning ashen. "Everyone, stay calm," she whispered, though her own voice was barely audible. "Go to your rooms. Quickly now." But no one moved. They were all frozen, watching the ominous procession of black vehicles pull up outside. The cars were sleek and expensive, their dark windows reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. They looked like something out of a spy movie, not something that belonged outside their humble home. One by one, the cars parked, forming a semicircle around the entrance of the orphanage. The engines cut out, leaving an unnerving silence. The children huddled closer, their eyes wide with fear. Lily felt a cold dread spread through her. This wasn't just Mr. Black coming back to shout. This was different. This felt like the end. The doors of the cars opened, almost silently. Men in dark suits emerged, tall and serious. They looked like bodyguards, or perhaps lawyers. They stood by the cars, their faces unreadable, their gazes fixed on the orphanage. Then from the lead car, the back door opened. A figure stepped out. It was Mr. Black. He was dressed in the same expensive suit, but now he held a thick stack of papers in one hand. His face was still unsmiling, his eyes still holding that unreadable depth. He walked towards the front door of Hope's Haven, his footsteps firm and deliberate. The men in suits remained by their cars, silent sentinels. Mrs. Gable instinctively stepped forward, shielding the children. Her hands were clenched, ready to face whatever came next. Lily stood beside her, her defiance now mixed with a heavy dose of fear. She had faced him before, but this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just leaving. He was coming back, and he had brought an army of dark suits with him. Mr. Black reached the front door. He didn't knock. He simply pushed it open, stepping back into the silence of the orphanage. His gaze swept over the frightened faces of the children, then settled on Lily. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Lily saw no anger, no triumph, only that same strange, almost amused glint. He held up the stack of papers. They looked official, important. "Mrs. Gable," he said, his voice as flat and deep as before, but with a new edge of authority. I've returned. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. And I've bought the building. A collective gasp went through the room. Mrs. Gable swayed, her hand flying to her mouth. Lily felt a wave of despair wash over her. It was over. He had won. He was going to throw them all out. Her brave act had been for nothing. But Mr. Black wasn't finished. He looked around the dusty, worn hall, his eyes lingering on the peeling paint and the scared faces of the children. Then he spoke again, and his next words were not what anyone expected. The words, "I've bought the building," hung in the air, heavy and final. Mrs. Gable's face was white, her hands clasped tightly. Lily felt a cold dread spread through her, confirming her worst fears. He hadn't come back to punish her directly, but to deliver the ultimate blow, to take away their home. Mr. Black surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on the terrified faces of the children, then on Lily, who stood firm beside Mrs. Gable. However, he continued, his voice cutting through the silence, I did not buy it to shut it down. A ripple of confusion, then a hesitant stir, went through the room. Mrs. Gable looked up, her brow furrowed. Lily blinked, trying to understand. Mr. Black took a step further into the hall. This establishment, he said, gesturing around with a sweep of his hand, is in disrepair. It is not fit for habitation, especially for children. His eyes, usually so devoid of emotion, seemed to hold a flicker of something new as he looked at the peeling paint and worn-out floorboards. My team, he continued, a nod towards the silent men in black suits who now stood just inside the doorway, will begin renovations immediately. New plumbing, new electrical, fresh paint, structural repairs. Every room will be updated. The kitchen will be completely overhauled and the pantry stocked. We will also be adding a new wing for educational resources, including a small library and computer lab. The children exchanged bewildered glances. Renovations? New wing? Stocked pantry? These were words they rarely heard, let alone associated with their struggling home. Mrs. Gable stared, her mouth slightly open, a mixture of disbelief and a fragile hope beginning to bloom in her eyes. Furthermore, Mr. Black pressed on, his voice still firm, but now carrying a different kind of weight. I have secured funds to ensure the ongoing operation of Hope's Haven. No more struggling for donations, Mrs. Gable. No more worrying about keeping the lights on. This orphanage will be fully funded for as long as it is needed. He held out the thick stack of papers towards Mrs. Gable. These are the deeds, the contracts, and the financial agreements. They outline everything. You will remain in charge, of course, Mrs. Gable. Your dedication to these children is evident, despite the fiscal challenges. Mrs. Gable took the papers with trembling hands, her eyes wide with tears of utter astonishment and relief. She clutched them to her chest as if they were a lifeline. Mr. Black, I don't understand, she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. Why? After everything. Mr. Black's gaze shifted from Mrs. Gable to Lily. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. It was not a smile of joy or warmth, but one of quiet acknowledgement. The girl, he said, his voice softer than they had ever heard it, reminded me of something important. He paused, looking around at the children, who were now less afraid and more openly curious. She reminded me what it means to be human. Lily felt a blush creep up her neck. Her act of defiance, born of anger and desperation, had somehow, impossibly, led to this. She had expected anger, punishment, eviction. Not new beds, a stock pantry, and a second chance for their home. Mr. Black took another step forward, his voice gaining a reflective tone. For too long, I have viewed the world through the lens of profit and loss. People were assets or liabilities. Emotions were inefficiencies. I had forgotten the value of defiance, of passion, of simply caring enough to fight for what is right, even when it seems hopeless. He looked directly at Lily again, and this time there was no amusement, only a deep, thoughtful expression. Your act, young lady, was not merely an insult. It was a statement, a raw, unfiltered expression of human spirit. It cut through the layers of cynicism I had built around myself, and for a moment, I saw a reflection of something I had lost. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a pristine white handkerchief. With a deliberate motion, he dabbed at the faint, dried stain on his polished shoe. That stain, he said, looking at the handkerchief, was a mark not of disrespect, but of a forgotten truth. It was a reminder that some things are more valuable than money. Some things are worth fighting for, even if it means getting a little messy. The men in suits began to move, quietly, efficiently. They started taking measurements, making notes, their presence no longer menacing but purposeful. One of them, a younger man with kind eyes, even offered a small smile to a wide-eyed toddler peeking from behind a curtain. Mrs. Gable, still clutching the papers, finally found her voice. "But Mr. Black, how can we ever repay you?" He turned back to her, his expression returning to its usual composed state, though perhaps a shade less severe than before. "You don't need to repay me, Mrs. Gable. Consider it an investment in humanity, in second chances, and perhaps," he glanced at Lily one last time, "an investment in reminding a very cold man what it feels like to feel something other than calculation." He turned to leave, but this time, his departure was different. He didn't just walk out. He paused at the door, turning back to face them all. "My team will be here first thing tomorrow morning to commence work. Please make arrangements for temporary relocation for the children if necessary, though we will try to work around them as much as possible." Then he looked at Lily. "And you, young lady," he said, a hint of that almost amused glint returning to his eyes. "Perhaps you can teach me a thing or two about passion." He walked out, the heavy door closing softly behind him. The black cars started their engines, one by one, and smoothly drove away, leaving Hope's Haven once again in silence. But this time, the silence was not filled with fear, but with a dizzying, overwhelming sense of hope. The children looked at Lily, not with fear, but with open admiration. She had spat on his shoe, and in doing so, had saved them all. The impossible had happened. The cold, arrogant Zoe had been touched by a simple act of defiance, and in that moment, the last trace of his forgotten soul had awakened. The children of Hope's Haven were still buzzing with a mixture of disbelief and joy after Mr. Black's departure. Mrs. Gable sat in her office, the stack of papers in her lap, her eyes moist with happy tears. The clock, which had hammered with dread earlier, now seemed to tick a gentle, hopeful rhythm. Lily, who had been the center of this incredible turn of events, felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her act of defiance, so small yet so powerful, had changed everything. The next morning, just as the sun painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges, the first signs of Mr. Black's promise arrived. It wasn't the black cars this time, but a fleet of white vans and trucks rumbling down the quiet street. They were filled with workers in clean overalls, carrying toolboxes, rolls of wire, and cans of fresh paint. The men from the day before, Mr. Black's team in their dark suits, were also there, directing the new arrivals with calm efficiency. The orphanage, which had been a place of quiet despair for so long, suddenly burst with activity. Builders began to measure walls, plumbers inspected old pipes, and electricians checked the flickering lights. Carpenters started planning new shelves for the library and sturdy frames for new beds. The air filled with the sounds of hammers, drills, and excited chatter. Mrs. Gable, still pinching herself to make sure it wasn't a dream, walked around with a bewildered smile. "They're really doing it," she whispered to Lily, who was helping to move some old books from the common room. "He's really doing it." Lily nodded, a grin spreading across her face. "He said he would." The children, initially a little scared by all the commotion, soon found themselves fascinated. They watched the workers with wide eyes, asking endless questions. Some even tried to help, though mostly they just got in the way. The workers, surprisingly patient, seemed to enjoy the attention, often pausing to explain what they were doing. The biggest transformation began in the kitchen. Old, rusty appliances were wheeled out, replaced by gleaming, new stainless steel ones. The pantry, once a shadowy, half-empty space, was soon filled with boxes and bags of food. Fresh fruits, vegetables, big jars of peanut butter, and countless loaves of bread appeared as if by magic. The aroma of new bread, baked by a cheerful cook who arrived with the supplies, soon filled the entire orphanage. "We haven't had fresh bread in ages," exclaimed a small boy named Tom, his eyes bright with wonder as he bit into a warm slice. The walls, which had been stained and peeling, were scraped clean and then covered with bright, cheerful colors. Blues, yellows, and soft greens replaced the drab browns and grays. New curtains appeared in every window, letting in more light and making the rooms feel bigger and happier. Mr. Black did not return during the first few days of work. His team handled everything, and they were very good at it. They made sure the children were safe and comfortable, even as their home was being rebuilt around them. They even set up a temporary play area outside, complete with new swings and a slide, which had the children screaming with delight. Lily, however, couldn't shake the memory of Mr. Black's last words to her. "Perhaps you can teach me a thing or two about passion." What did he mean by that? And why had her spitting on his shoe, an act of pure frustration and anger, made him change his mind so completely? She knew it wasn't just the spit. It was what it represented. One afternoon, about a week into the renovations, the familiar low hum of a black car returned. This time it was a single vehicle pulling up quietly outside. Lily, who was helping Mrs. Gable sort new blankets, felt her heart give a little jump. Mr. Black stepped out. He was dressed less formally today, in a dark sweater and slacks, but he still carried an air of importance. His gaze swept over the bustling scene, the freshly painted walls, the happy sounds of children playing in the newly installed playground. A faint nod of approval crossed his face. He walked into the orphanage, his steps a little slower, a little less rigid than before. He didn't head straight for Mrs. Gable's office. Instead, he paused in the main hall, watching the children. A group of little ones were playing with colorful building blocks on a new rug. One small girl looked up, saw him, and then, surprisingly, smiled. Mr. Black didn't smile back, but his eyes softened almost imperceptibly. He found Mrs. Gable and Lily in one of the newly renovated bedrooms, folding soft, new blankets. "Mr. Black," Mrs. Gable exclaimed, dropping a blanket in surprise. "Welcome. Look at all this. It's incredible. We can't thank you enough." He gave a slight incline of his head. "The work is progressing as scheduled. Are there any immediate concerns, Mrs. Gable?" "Concerns? Oh no. Only gratitude, sir. Everything is perfect. More than perfect. The children are so happy. They haven't stopped talking about the new playground and the amazing food." Mr. Black nodded. His eyes then found Lily, who stood quietly beside Mrs. Gable, watching him. "Lily," he said, his voice measured, "I trust you are finding the new arrangement satisfactory." Lily felt a wave of shyness, but she pushed it away. "Yes, sir. It's wonderful. Thank you." He looked at her, and for a moment, it felt like only the two of them were in the room. "I asked you to teach me about passion," he said, his voice low. "Tell me, what did you feel when you expressed your displeasure on my footwear?" Lily's cheeks flushed. She remembered the burning anger, the desperate hope that her small act could somehow make a difference. "I felt angry, sir," she admitted, "and scared. But mostly, I felt like someone had to do something. You were going to take our home, and no one else seemed able to stop you." Mr. Black listened, his head slightly tilted. "And now, Lily thought for a moment. "Now I feel grateful and a little bit confused. I thought you would be really mad. I thought you would make everything worse." He gave that almost smile again. Indeed, that was the logical response. But logic, I am discovering, does not account for everything. He looked around the newly painted room, then back at Lily. "Your act, Lily, was a catalyst. It forced me to see beyond the numbers, beyond the cold equations of business. It reminded me that there are human costs to every decision, and human spirits that refuse to be broken." He paused, then added, "You ignited something in me that I had believed long dead. A spark of humanity. For that, I owe you thanks." Lily was speechless. She had never imagined such a conversation. She had never imagined that her moment of rebellion would lead to such an outcome. "I will be returning periodically," Mr. Black announced, addressing both Lily and Mrs. Gable, "to ensure the smooth operation and continued well-being of Hope's Haven. And perhaps," he looked at Lily, "to continue my education." With another small nod, he turned and walked out, leaving behind not just a newly renovated room, but a lingering sense of wonder and a promise of a future that seemed brighter than any of them had dared to dream. The heavy door closed, and the orphanage was once again filled with the sounds of happy children and busy workers, a symphony of renewal thanks to a small act of spit and a forgotten soul. The weeks that followed Mr. Black's second visit were a whirlwind of activity and change at Hope's Haven. The orphanage, once a symbol of fading hope, was now a vibrant construction site, buzzing with the promise of a brighter future. Every day brought new improvements, new deliveries, and new reasons for the children to smile. The exterior of the building was transformed first. Scaffolding rose like metal trees against the old brickwork. Broken windows were replaced with sparkling new panes, and the leaky roof was completely redone. The drab, peeling paint was stripped away, and a cheerful, warm yellow color was applied, making the orphanage look welcoming and bright, a stark contrast to its former gloomy appearance. Even the neglected garden was tended to, with new flower beds planted and a fresh green lawn laid out. Inside, the changes were even more dramatic. The old, creaky floorboards were reinforced and polished until they gleamed. The small, cramped rooms were opened up where possible, creating larger, airier spaces for the children to live and play. Each bedroom was given a complete makeover. New, sturdy beds with soft mattresses and colorful bedding replaced the worn-out cots. Desks and chairs were added, giving the older children a quiet place to study, and shelves filled with books and games adorned the walls. The library, which Mr. Black had promised, quickly took shape. What was once a dusty storage room became a haven of stories and knowledge. Walls of new bookshelves were filled with books of every kind: adventure, fantasy, science, and history. Comfortable armchairs and beanbags invited children to curl up and read. Next to it, the computer lab was set up with several new computers, opening up a world of learning and connection for the children who had never had such access before. The kitchen, already updated, continued to be a source of wonder. Not only was it filled with state-of-the-art appliances, but a constant supply of fresh, healthy food meant that no child ever went hungry. The meals prepared by the new cook were delicious and varied, a far cry from the simple, often repetitive fare they were used to. The children gained weight, their cheeks filled out, and their eyes sparkled with health and happiness. Mrs. Gable, though still overwhelmed by the generosity, managed the daily operations with renewed energy. She worked closely with Mr. Black's team, making sure that every decision considered the children's needs and comfort. She often found herself just standing in a renovated room, tears welling up in her eyes, marveling at the transformation. Lily, too, found herself deeply involved. Mr. Black's words about passion had stayed with her. She often found herself talking to the workers, asking about their trades, learning about the process of rebuilding. She helped Mrs. Gable organize the new library, carefully arranging books and making sure the younger children knew how to use the computers. She felt a new sense of purpose, a quiet pride in being part of this incredible change. Mr. Black, true to his word, visited regularly. His visits were no longer brief, tense encounters. He would walk through the orphanage, observing the progress, sometimes offering a quiet suggestion to his team. He often spent time in the library, watching the children read, or in the play area, observing their games. He still wasn't a man of many smiles, but his presence no longer brought fear. Instead, it brought a sense of stability and reassurance. During one of his visits, he found Lily in the newly completed art room, helping a group of younger children paint. The room was bright, filled with easels, paints, and brushes, a place where creativity could flourish. Lily was laughing, her hands covered in streaks of blue and green paint, as she guided a small boy's hand. Mr. Black watched for a moment, then cleared his throat. Lily looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her hands on a rag. "The art room is a good addition," he observed, his gaze taking in the colorful chaos. "Yes, sir," Lily replied, her heart still thrumming a little faster in his presence. "The children love it. It gives them a way to express themselves." He nodded slowly. "Indeed, expression, a valuable commodity." He then looked at her. "You seem to have taken to this new environment, Lily. Your passion for it is evident." Lily smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "It's easy to be passionate when you see so much good happening, sir. When you see people caring." Mr. Black's eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, seemed to soften. "Caring," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, a concept I am reacquainting myself with." He paused, then added, "You were right, Lily. There are things more important than profit, things that money cannot buy, but can certainly enhance." He looked around the room once more, his gaze lingering on the vibrant paintings on the wall, the happy faces of the children. "This place," he said, "it feels different now. It feels alive." Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was a small acknowledgement, but it meant the world. She had seen the transformation in the orphanage, but she was also beginning to see a subtle transformation in Mr. Black himself. The cold, hard edges seemed a little softer, his gaze a little less distant. He was still Mr. Black, the powerful CEO, but he was also something more. He was the man who had been reminded of his own humanity. As the last of the major renovations were completed, Hope's Haven stood as a beacon of renewed life. It was a testament to the power of a single, brave act and the unexpected kindness it could awaken. The children were thriving, their laughter echoing through the halls that once knew only silence and fear. The orphanage was no longer just a building. It was truly a haven, a home filled with warmth, security, and a future brighter than anyone had ever dared to imagine. The transformation of Hope's Haven was nothing short of miraculous. Where once stood a decaying building, now bloomed a vibrant home, filled with warmth and life. Mr. Black's vision, executed by his efficient team, had completely reshaped the environment for the children. Every corner of the orphanage, inside and out, echoed with the new beginnings. The once bare walls were now adorned with colorful murals painted by local artists, depicting scenes of nature, space, and fantastical creatures. The children themselves had contributed, their own artwork proudly displayed in frames along the hallways. The faint, musty smell of old wood was replaced by the fresh scent of new paint, clean linens, and the delicious aromas wafting from the perpetually busy kitchen. The kitchen, in particular, was a hub of activity and joy. It was no longer a place of rationing and careful budgeting. Now, it was a cheerful space where a dedicated cook, a kind woman named Martha, prepared 3 wholesome, delicious meals a day, along with healthy snacks. The pantry, once a symbol of scarcity, now overflowed with fresh produce, dairy, meats, and grains. The children, who had often gone to bed with rumbling stomachs, now enjoyed second helpings and even occasional treats like homemade cookies and fruit pies. "Remember when we used to have porridge every single day?" whispered a little girl named Daisy to her friend Tom during breakfast, her mouth full of fluffy pancakes. Tom nodded, his eyes wide. "And sometimes, if we were lucky, a small piece of toast." He looked down at his plate, piled high with scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and those pancakes. Now it's like a feast every morning. The dining room, bright and airy, buzzed with happy chatter. The children, once quiet and reserved, were now boisterous and lively, their voices ringing with newfound confidence. Mrs. Gable watched them, a profound sense of peace settling over her. Her worries had been lifted, replaced by an overwhelming gratitude that shone in her every interaction. Education became a cornerstone of the new Hope's Haven. The library was always busy, with children poring over books, their imaginations soaring. The computer lab was a hive of quiet concentration, as older children researched projects and younger ones played educational games. Tutors, hired by Mr. Black's foundation, visited regularly, offering personalized help with homework and introducing new subjects like music and coding. Lily, in particular, flourished in this new environment. She spent hours in the library, devouring books, and often helped the younger children with their reading. She felt a deep connection to the orphanage, not just as her home, but as a place she now actively helped to shape. Her moments of defiance had not only saved their home, but had opened doors to opportunities she had never dreamed of. She even started teaching some of the younger kids how to use the art supplies, remembering Mr. Black's words about expression. Mr. Black continued his periodic visits. He never stayed long, and his demeanor remained outwardly reserved, but his eyes missed nothing. He observed the children's growth, their improved health, their blossoming confidence. He saw the genuine smiles, the easy laughter, the absence of the fear that had once clouded their faces. One afternoon, during a quiet moment, Mr. Black found Mrs. Gable in her office, which now sported new furniture and a fresh coat of paint. He noted the healthy glow on her face, a stark contrast to the weary, worried woman he had met just weeks before. "Mrs. Gable," he began, his voice soft. "It appears the investment is yielding significant returns." She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. "Beyond anything I could have ever imagined, Mr. Black. It's not just the building, it's the children. They're different. They're happier, healthier, more hopeful." "And you?" he inquired, a hint of something akin to curiosity in his tone. "And me," she chuckled softly. "I can sleep at night, Mr. Black. I can focus on nurturing these precious souls, instead of constantly battling against the tide of poverty and neglect. You've given us all a new lease on life." He nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. It seems a small act can have profound consequences. He was clearly referring to Lily's act, though he didn't name her directly. The girl's spirited demonstration, it seems, was more than just a momentary lapse in judgment. Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Lily is a remarkable young woman. She has always had a strong sense of justice and a very brave heart." Mr. Black remained silent for a moment, then turned to look out the window at the children playing in the sun-drenched garden. "Indeed," he finally said, "a brave heart, a quality I had perhaps undervalued." His visits always ended the same way, with a quiet departure in his black car. But each time he left, the orphanage felt a little more secure, a little more loved. The children no longer feared the black cars. They associated them with progress, with kindness, with a man who, in his own quiet way, was healing their home and, perhaps, himself. The tale of Lily's spit on the CEO's shoe became a legend whispered among the children, a reminder that even the smallest act of courage could change the world. Hope's Haven was no longer just a name. It was a living, breathing testament to the power of human connection and the awakening of a forgotten soul. The weeks turned into months, and Hope's Haven flourished under Mr. Black's unexpected guardianship. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a comfortable routine of progress and plenty. The children were thriving, their laughter echoing through the halls, a symphony of joy that had been missing for too long. Mrs. Gable, no longer burdened by endless worries, could focus entirely on nurturing the young souls in her care. Lily, in particular, had blossomed, her quiet bravery now channeled into helping and leading the younger children. Mr. Black's visits continued, though they were no longer met with nervous apprehension. He had become a familiar, if still somewhat reserved, presence. He would tour the facilities, speak quietly with Mrs. Gable, and observe the children. He rarely smiled broadly, but the subtle softening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible nods of approval, spoke volumes. One sunny afternoon, Mr. Black arrived for a scheduled meeting with Mrs. Gable. They sat in her newly renovated office, the sunlight streaming through the clean windows, highlighting the vibrant new paint. The air was filled with the distant sounds of children playing outside, a joyful backdrop to their conversation. "The latest reports are excellent, Mrs. Gable," Mr. Black began, tapping a neatly organized file on her desk. "Academic performance has shown a significant upward trend, and the health records indicate a marked improvement across the board. Your staff's dedication is commendable. Mrs. Gable beamed. It's all thanks to the resources you've provided, Mr. Black. We finally have the means to give these children the care they deserve. She paused, then looked at him with genuine warmth. I still find it hard to believe sometimes. Your generosity has been life-changing. Mr. Black leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting towards the window, where Lily was helping some younger children plant sunflowers in the garden. Generosity, he repeated, as if trying out the word. An interesting term. I confess, it was not a quality I valued highly before. Mrs. Gable listened, sensing a deeper reflection in his words. For years, Mr. Black continued, his voice low and thoughtful, my world was defined by efficiency, by profit margins, by cold, hard data. Emotions were distractions. Human connection was a variable I had little use for. I believed that sentimentality was a weakness, a hindrance to success. He turned his gaze back to Mrs. Gable. My life was sterile. Productive, yes, by all conventional measures, but ultimately unfulfilling. I saw people as cogs in a machine, myself included. Mrs. Gable nodded gently, remembering the cold, hard man who had first walked through their doors. Then, he went on, a faint, almost wistful expression crossing his face. A young girl, full of fire and indignation, spat on my shoe. He paused, a flicker of that earlier amusement in his eyes. It was an utterly illogical act, completely irrational. And yet, he looked back at Lily in the garden. It was like a splash of cold water. It cut through the layers of indifference I had meticulously built around myself. It was a raw, undeniable burst of human passion, of a spirit unwilling to be crushed. Lily, Mrs. Gable murmured, a soft smile on her lips. Indeed, Lily, Mr. Black confirmed. That moment, Mrs. Gable, was a profound shock to my system. It was not anger I felt, but a strange sort of recognition. A recognition of something I had lost, something I had buried deep beneath my ambition and my calculations. He adjusted his glasses, a gesture that seemed less about formality and more about deep thought. She reminded me that there is more to life than acquisition, more than control. She reminded me of the inherent value of a single human life, of the simple, undeniable truth that people matter, that their well-being, their happiness, their future, these are not mere statistics. His voice grew softer, almost contemplative. She reminded me what it means to be human, to feel empathy, to care, not for personal gain, but simply because it is right. In that single, defiant act, she awakened the last trace of my forgotten soul. Mrs. Gable listened, her heart swelling with emotion. She had suspected as much, but to hear it from Mr. Black himself, in such a frank and honest way, was deeply moving. She is a remarkable girl, Mr. Black, full of courage and heart. She is, he agreed, a rare, genuine warmth in his tone. And because of her, this place has become more than an investment. It has become a purpose, a tangible manifestation of a renewed perspective. He then transitioned back to business, discussing future plans for expansion, new programs, and ensuring the long-term stability of Hope's Haven. But the shift felt different now. It wasn't just about figures and efficiency. It was about fostering life, nurturing potential, and building a community. As their meeting concluded, Mr. Black stood up. I will continue to ensure Hope's Haven thrives, Mrs. Gable, and I will continue to learn from the lessons that particular act of defiance taught me. He gave her a slight, almost smile before heading towards the door. Mrs. Gable watched him go, a profound sense of hope and gratitude filling her heart. Lily's simple act had not only saved their home, but had, in some miraculous way, helped a lost soul find its way back to humanity. The orphanage was now a beacon, not just for the children within its walls, but as a living testament to the transformative power of a brave heart. Months turned into a year, and the changes at Hope's Haven were not just physical. They were etched into the very spirit of the place and everyone connected to it. The orphanage had become a model of care and opportunity, a testament to what could happen when resources met genuine need. Mr. Black, once a distant and feared figure, had evolved into a respected benefactor, his influence now a source of comfort and growth. His transformation was perhaps the most profound. The initial flicker of amusement and recognition that Lily's act had sparked had grown into a steady flame of purpose. He still ran his vast businesses with the same sharp intellect and efficiency. But now, those qualities were tempered with a newfound understanding of human value. His decisions began to reflect a broader perspective, one that considered the well-being of his employees, the impact on communities, and the importance of ethical practices. He had started other philanthropic ventures, quietly funding schools and hospitals in underserved areas, always with the same meticulous planning he applied to his companies. One warm spring afternoon, a year after the fateful encounter, Hope's Haven was celebrating its annual spring festival. The garden, once overgrown and neglected, was now a riot of color with flowers Lily had helped plant. Children laughed as they chased each other around the new playground, and the smell of Martha's homemade lemonade and cookies filled the air. Parents from the community, grateful for the opportunities the revitalized orphanage offered, mingled with staff and volunteers. Mr. Black was there, too. He wasn't in his usual dark suit, but a comfortable blazer and slacks. He was observing the festivities from a slight distance, a faint, almost content smile playing on his lips. Mrs. Gable joined him, holding a small plate of cookies. "It's quite a sight, isn't it, Mr. Black?" she said, her voice full of warmth. He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the happy scene. "It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of investment in the right areas and the right people," Mrs. Gable added gently, her eyes twinkling. "You've changed so much, Mr. Black. I remember the day you first walked in here, like a storm cloud." He chuckled softly, a sound that was once rare, now more frequent. "Indeed, a storm cloud, driven by numbers and devoid of light. I owe a great deal to this place, Mrs. Gable, and to one particularly spirited young woman." At that moment, Lily approached them. She was taller, more confident, her eyes shining with a quiet strength. She had just finished organizing a painting station for the younger children. "Mr. Black, Mrs. Gable," she greeted them with a respectful nod. "Everything is going well. The children are enjoying the new art supplies." Mr. Black turned to her, his gaze holding genuine warmth. "Lily, it is always good to see the fruits of your passion." Lily's cheeks flushed slightly, but she met his gaze without hesitation. "It's easy to be passionate when you believe in something, sir." "And you believed," he stated, a deep thoughtfulness in his voice. "You believed when no one else dared to. You believed when I myself had forgotten how to." He paused, then looked around at the thriving orphanage, the happy children, the vibrant life that now pulsed through its walls. "Lily," he said, his voice carrying a gravity that made both Lily and Mrs. Gable listen closely. "Your act that day. It wasn't just defiance. It was a wake-up call. It was a mirror held up to a soul that had grown cold and distant. For years," he continued, speaking not just to them, but almost to himself, "I chased success, power, wealth, and I achieved it. But in doing so, I lost touch with what truly mattered. I forgot the simple joy of helping others, the profound satisfaction of nurturing life, the intrinsic value of kindness." He met Lily's eyes. "You, with your brave, illogical act, reminded me of my good heart. You showed me that even in the darkest corners of a forgotten soul, a spark of humanity can still be rekindled. You taught me that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the smiles of happy children, in the growth of a community, in the quiet satisfaction of making a positive difference." Lily listened, tears welling in her eyes. She had never truly understood the depth of his transformation or the profound impact her small act had made. "So, thank you, Lily," Mr. Black concluded, extending a hand to her. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be human. Thank you for awakening the last trace of my forgotten soul." Lily took his hand, her own small but firm. It was a handshake not between a rich CEO and an orphan girl, but between two people who had, in a strange and beautiful way, helped each other find something invaluable. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rejuvenated Hope's Haven, the festival continued. The laughter of children, the warmth of shared joy, and the quiet understanding between three people who had journeyed through fear and defiance to reach a place of profound hope. The orphanage, once a symbol of struggle, now stood as a living testament to the power of a single, brave act to not only change a building, but to change a man, and in doing so, enrich countless lives. Lily's brave act had indeed made Mr. Black remember his good heart, and in turn, he had given them all a new heart for Hope's Haven.